Today on Declassified, an Epoch Times special, Spygate. Inside the Obama officials' plot to take down Trump, we explore how the intelligence community and federal agencies conspired against Donald Trump's presidency. This story written by Epoch Times contributor Jeff Carlson. Please remember to subscribe and hit the notifications button. Spygate has become one of the greatest political scandals in America's history. Efforts by high-ranking officials in the CIA, FBI, Department of Justice, and State Department to portray President Donald Trump as having colluded with Russia were the culmination of years of bias and politicization under the Obama administration. The weaponization of our intelligence community and governmental agencies created an environment that allowed for interference in the investigation into Hillary Clinton and the relentless pursuit of a manufactured collusion narrative against Trump. A willing and complicit media spread unsubstantiated or falsified leaks as facts in an effort to promote the Russia collusion narrative rather than objectively report on it. The Spygate scandal also raises a bigger question. Was the 2016 election a one-time aberration, or is it symptomatic of decades of institutional political corruption? This story builds on dozens of congressional testimonies, court documents, and other research to provide an inside look at the actions of Obama administration officials in this scandal. To provide a backdrop for understanding this abuse of power, it helps to go back to July of 2011, when DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz was appointed. From the very start, Horowitz found his duties throttled by Attorney General Eric Holder, who placed limitations on the Inspector General's rights to have unobstructed access to information. Holder used this tactic to delay Horowitz's investigation of the failed sting operation known as Operation Fast and Furious. Horowitz told members of Congress in February 2015, "We got access to information up to 2010 in all of these categories. No law changed in 2010. No policy changed. It was simply a decision by the General Counsel's office in 2010 that they viewed now the law differently, and as a result they weren't going to give us that information." On August 5, 2014, Horowitz and other inspectors general had sent a letter to Congress asking for unimpeded access to all records. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates responded on July 20, 2015, with a 58-page memorandum titled Memorandum for Sally Quillian Yates, Deputy Attorney General, written by Carl R. Thompson, the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the Office of Legal Counsel, OLC. The July 20, 2015 opinion was widely criticised, but it accomplished what it was intended to do. The opinion limited IG Horowitz's oversight from extending to any information collected under Title III, including intercepted communications and national security letters. Notably, the New York Times disclosed that national security letters were used in the surveillance of the Trump 2016 presidential campaign. In response, on August 3, 2015, IG Horowitz sent a blistering letter to Congress. The letter was signed not only by Horowitz but by all the other acting inspector generals as well. The OLC opinion's restrictive reading of the IG Act represents a potentially serious challenge to the authority of every inspector general and our collective ability to conduct our work thoroughly, independently, and in a timely manner. Our concern is that, as a result of the OLC opinion, agencies other than DOJ may likewise withhold crucial records from their inspectors general, adversely impacting their work. The only means to address this serious threat to Inspector General independence is for Congress to promptly pass legislation that affirms the independent authority of Inspectors General to access without delay all information and data in an agency's possession that an Inspector General deems necessary to execute its oversight functions under the law. Horowitz continued to push Congress for oversight access and encouraged passage of the Inspector General Empowerment Act. Horowitz would ultimately win his battle, but only as President Barack Obama was leaving office. On December 16, 2016, Obama finally signed the Inspectors General Empowerment Act into law. It is against this backdrop of minimal oversight that Spygate took place. Ironically, the Clinton email server investigation known as the mid-year exam originated from a disclosure contained in a June 29, 2015 memo sent by the Inspectors General for both the State Department and the intelligence community to Patrick F. Kennedy, then Undersecretary of State for Management. The IG's memo included an assessment that Clinton's email account contained hundreds of classified emails, despite Clinton's claims that there were no classified information present on her server. On July 6, 2015, the IG for the intelligence community made a referral to the FBI, which resulted in the official opening of an investigation into the Clinton email server by FBI officials Randall Coleman and Charles Cable on July 10, 2015. At this time, Peter Strzok was an assistant special agent in charge at the FBI's Washington field office. The assistant director in charge at the Washington field office during this period was Andrew McCabe, a position he assumed on September 14, 2014. On July 30, 2015, within weeks of the FBI's opening of the Clinton investigation, McCabe was suddenly promoted to the number 3 position within the FBI. With his new title of Associate Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe was transferred to FBI headquarters from the Washington field office, and his direct involvement in the Clinton investigation began. Strzok would shortly follow. Less than a month after McCabe was transferred, FBI headquarters reached out to the Washington field office, saying they needed greater staffing and resources based on what they were looking at, based on some of the investigative steps that were under consideration. That's what Strzok told congressional investigators in a closed-door hearing on June 27, 2018. Strzok was one of the agents selected in late August 2015. He was assigned to the mid-year exam team and transferred to FBI headquarters. Strzok, in his comments to lawmakers, acknowledged that the newly formed investigative team was largely made up of hand-picked personnel from the Washington field office and FBI headquarters. Starting in October 2015 and into the first months of 2016, FBI Director James Comey made a series of high-profile reassignments that resulted in the complete turnover of the upper echelon of the FBI team working on the Clinton email investigation. On October 12, 2015, Louis Bladel was moved to the New York field office. December 1, 2015, Randall Coleman, Assistant Director Head of Counterintelligence, was named as Executive Assistant Director of the Criminal Cyber Response and Services Branch and was replaced by Bill Priestap. December 9, 2015, Charles Sandy Cable was moved to the Washington field office. February 1, 2016, Mark Giuliano retired as Deputy FBI Director and was replaced by Andrew McCabe. February 11, 2016, John Giacalone retired as Executive Assistant Director and was replaced by Michael Steinbach. March 2, 2016, Gerald Roberts Jr. was moved to the Washington field office. Comey was the only non-involved senior FBI leadership official who remained a constant during the entirety of the Clinton email investigation. McCabe had the second longest tenure. On January 29, 2016, Comey appointed McCabe as Deputy FBI Director, replacing the retiring Giuliano, and McCabe assumed the number 2 position within the FBI after having held the number 3 position for just 6 months. It was at this point that FBI lawyer Lisa Page was assigned to McCabe as his special counsel. This is not the first time that Page worked directly for McCabe. James Baker, the FBI's former general counsel, told congressional investigators that Page had worked for McCabe at various times during McCabe's career. Mr. Baker saw at various points she was assigned to work for Andy McCabe when he was the Executive Assistant Director for National Security. She was in that position when I got to OGC Office of General Counsel. I'm not sure when she started, maybe 2013 until he left, and I can't remember when he left that job. And then when Andy came back as the Deputy Director, Lisa then held a special advisor kind of position for him as well. So she was technically still in OGC, but she was on assignment to work for Andy McCabe. By early 2016, the 3 participants in the infamous insurance policy meeting, McCabe, Strzok, and Page, were now in place at the FBI. In January 2016, Bill Priestap was named as head of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, replacing Coleman and inheriting the Clinton email investigation in the process. According to Priestap, Coleman had set up a reporting mechanism that leaders of that team would report directly to him, not through the customary other chain of command in the Clinton email investigation. Priestap, who said he didn't know why Coleman had set it up, kept the chain of command in place when he assumed Coleman's position in January 2016. The The new structure resulted in some unusual reporting lines that were outside normal chains of command. Strzok, who would not normally fall under Priestap's oversight, was now reporting directly to him. As Priestap described it, the makeup of the team involved in the Clinton investigation was comprised of three differing but intertwined elements: the filter team, the primary team, and the senior leadership team. The primary team was small, consisting of only Strzok, FBI analyst Jonathan Moffa, and to varying degrees filter team leader Rick Maines and FBI lawyer Sally Moyer. Maines reported to Strzok and Moffa, who in turn, along with Moyer, provided briefings to Priestap. Below Strzok and Moffa was the day-to-day investigative filter team of approximately 15 FBI agents and analysts that was overseen by Maines, a supervisory special agent. The senior leadership team was more fluid, consisting of higher-level FBI officials who provided briefings and updates to Comey and/or McCabe. In addition to Priestap, Strzok, and Moffa, frequent attendees included Moyer, Page, Deputy General Counsel Tricia Anderson, Comey's Chief of Staff Jim Rybicki, and General Counsel James Baker. While the elements of the day-to-day investigative team differed for the Clinton email investigation and the Trump-Russia investigation, the primary team remained the same throughout both cases, as did the lines of communication between the FBI and DOJ. According to testimony from Page, John Carlin, who ran the DOJ's National Security Division (NSD), was receiving briefings on both investigations directly from McCabe. Priestap, who testified that he was unaware of the frequency of meetings between McCabe, Strzok, and Page, seems to have been kept in the dark regarding many of the actions by Strzok, who appeared to be exercising significant investigative control. Priestap was asked about this by congressional investigators during a July 5, 2018 testimony. Rep. Meadows: "It sounds like Peter Strzok was kind of driving the train here. Would you agree with that?" Mr. Priestap: "Peter and John, yeah." Additionally, Page often circumvented the established chain of command, not only with McCabe, for whom she reportedly served as a conduit for Strzok, but also with Baker. Additionally, there were concerns that Page bypassed both the Executive Assistant Director for the National Security Branch, first Gia Colon and then Steinbach, and Priestap, the head of counterintelligence. Tricia Anderson, the number 2 lawyer, admitted to being aware of these concerns to congressional investigators. Mr. Baker, Investigative Counsel, House Majority Staff: "Did you ever hear specifically either Mr. Giacalone or Mr. Steinbach complain about the role of Lisa Page? Not necessarily her role and what she had responsibility for, but because she had access to Mr. McCabe, and she also would get information from Strzok that those people, Steinbach or Giacalone, and I guess Priestap to a certain extent, they would probably be the ones most affected by information not coming through them. Did you ever hear any one of them specifically complain about that?" Miss Anderson: "I didn't have any. I don't believe I heard either of them. Neither of them personally complained to me, but I was aware of their concerns." A report published by Inspector General Horowitz in June last year, which reviewed the FBI's investigation of the Clinton email case, included the notable statement that several witnesses informed the IG that Page circumvented the official chain of command and that Strzok communicated important mid-year case information to her and thus to McCabe without Priestap's or Steinbach's knowledge. Steinbach, who was the Executive Assistant Director and Priestap's direct supervisor, left the FBI in early 2017. According to Anderson, McCabe was aware of ongoing concerns regarding Page's circumventions, but it appears that nothing was done to address them. Mr. Baker, Investigative Counsel, House Majority Staff: "Do you know if Mr. McCabe was aware that some of his agent executives were concerned that they were being bypassed on information on what, by all accounts, was a sensitive critical investigation?" Ms. Anderson: "My understanding was that he was aware." By the spring of 2016, the Clinton email investigation was already winding down. This was due in large part to the fact that the DOJ, under Attorney General Loretta Lynch, had decided to set an unusually high threshold for the prosecution of Clinton, effectively ensuring that from the outset she would not be charged. In order for Clinton to be prosecuted, the DOJ required the FBI to establish evidence of intent, even though the gross negligence statute explicitly does not require this. This meant that the FBI would have needed to find a smoking gun, such as an email or an admission made during FBI questioning, revealing Clinton or her aides knowingly set up the private email server to send classified information. According to Page, the DOJ played a far larger role in the Clinton investigation than had been previously known. Everybody talks about this as if this was the FBI investigation, and the truth of the matter is there was not a single step other than the July 5th statement. There was not a single investigative step that we did not do in consultation with or at the direction of the Justice Department. This is what Page told congressional investigators on July 13, 2018. Comey had also hinted at the influence exerted by the DOJ over the Clinton investigation in a July 5, 2016 press conference in which he recommended Clinton not be charged, stating that there were obvious considerations like the strength of the evidence, especially regarding intent. Notably, Comey had been convinced to remove the term gross negligence to describe Clinton's actions from his prepared statement by, among others, Page, FBI agent Peter Strzok, senior legal counsel Tricia Anderson, and FBI analyst Jonathan Moffa. As the Clinton investigation wound down, interest in the intelligence community in the Trump campaign was ramping up. Sometime in 2015, former CIA Director John Brennan established himself as the point man in the U.S. operation to stop a potential Trump presidency, using a combination of unofficial foreign intelligence compiled by contacts, colleagues, and associates primarily from the UK, but also from other Five Eyes members such as Australia. Brennan then fed this information to the FBI, a fact Brennan stated repeatedly during a May 23, 2017 congressional testimony. I made sure that anything that was involving US persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the FBI. Brennan also admitted that it was his intelligence that helped establish the FBI investigation. I was aware of intelligence and information about contacts between Russian officials and US persons that raised concerns in my mind about whether or not those individuals were cooperating with the Russians, either in a witting or unwitting fashion, and it served as the basis to the FBI investigation to determine whether such collusion or cooperation occurred. In late 2015, Britain's Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, was involved in the collection of information regarding then-candidate Trump and transmitting it to the United States. The GCHQ is the UK's equivalent of America's National Security Agency, NSA. As GCHQ was gathering intelligence, low-level Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos appears to have been targeted after a series of highly coincidental meetings. Most of these meetings with Papadopoulos, whose own background and reasons for joining the Trump campaign remain suspicious, occurred in the first half of 2016. Maltese professor Joseph Mifsud, Australian diplomat Alexander Downer, FBI informant Stephen Halper, and officials from the UK's Foreign and Commonwealth Office, FCO, all crossed paths with Papadopoulos, some repeatedly so. Mifsud, who introduced Papadopoulos to a series of Russian contacts, appears to have more connections with Western intelligence than Russian intelligence. Alexander Downer, the Australian diplomat, met with Papadopoulos in May 2016 in a meeting established through a chain of two intermediaries. Information allegedly relayed to Papadopoulos during the Downer meeting that the Russians had damaging information on Hillary Clinton appears nearly identical to information later contained in the first memo from British former MI6 spy and dossier author Christopher Steele that the FBI obtained in early July 2016. Downer's conversation with Papadopoulos was reportedly disclosed to the FBI on July 22, 2016 through Australian government channels, although it may have come directly from Downer himself. Details from the conversation between Downer and Papadopoulos were then used by the FBI to open their counterintelligence investigation on July 31, 2016. In the summer of 2016, Robert Hannigan, the head of the UK's GCHQ, travelled to Washington to meet with Brennan regarding alleged communications between the Trump campaign and Moscow. Around the same time, Brennan formed an interagency task force comprising an estimated 6 agencies and/or government departments. The FBI, Treasury, and DOJ handled the domestic inquiry into Trump, and possible Russia connections. The CIA, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and NSA handled foreign and intelligence aspects. During this time, Brennan appeared to have employed the use of reverse targeting, which refers to the targeting of a foreign individual with the intent of capturing data on a US citizen. Brennan, we called it incidental collection in terms of CIA's Foreign Intelligence Collection Authorities. Anytime we would incidentally collect information on a US person, we would hand that over to the FBI because they have the legal authority to do it. We would not pursue that type of investigative, sort of leads. We would give it to the FBI, so we were picking things up that was of great relevance to the FBI, and we wanted to make sure they were there so they could piece it together with whatever they were collecting domestically here. As this foreign intelligence, unofficial in nature and outside of any traditional channels, was gathered, Brennan began a process of feeding his gathered intelligence to the FBI. Repeated transfers of foreign intelligence from the CIA director pushed the FBI toward the establishment of a formal counterintelligence investigation. The last major segment of Brennan's efforts involved a series of 3 reports. The first, titled The Joint Statement from the Department of Homeland Security and Office of the Director of National Intelligence on Election Security, was released on October 7, 2016. The second report, Grizzly Step, Russian malicious cyber activity, was released on December 29, 2016. The third report, Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent US Elections, also known as the Intelligence Community Assessment, ICA, was released on January 6, 2017. This final report was used to continue pushing the Russia collusion narrative following the election of President Donald Trump. Notably, Admiral Mike Rogers of the NSA publicly dissented from the findings of the ICA, assigning only a moderate confidence level. Meanwhile, another less official effort began. Information paid for by the Democratic National Committee, DNC, and the Hillary Clinton campaign targeting Donald Trump made its way to the highest levels of the FBI and the State Department, with a sophisticated strategy relying on personal connections of hired operatives. At the center of the multi-pronged strategy to disseminate the information were Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson and former MI6 spy Christopher Steele. In March 2016, Fusion GPS approached Perkins Coie, the law firm used by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, expressing interest in an engagement according to an October 24, 2017 response letter by Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie hired Fusion in April 2016 to perform a variety of research services during the 2016 election cycle. Steele's firm, Orbis Business Intelligence, was retained by Fusion during the period between June and November 2016. During this time, Steele produced 16 memos, the last memo dated October 20, 2016. There was one final memo that Steele wrote on December 13th at the request of Senator John McCain. Steele provided Fusion GPS with something that Simpson's firm was lacking: access to individuals within the FBI and the State Department. These contacts could be traced back to at least 2010, when Steele had provided assistance in the FBI's investigation into FIFA over concerns that Russia might have been engaged in bribery to host the 2018 World Cup. Sometime in the later half of 2014, Steele began to informally provide reports he had prepared for a private client to the State Department. One of the recipients of the reports was Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. After Steele's company was hired by Fusion GPS in June 2016, he began to reach out to the FBI through Michael Gator, an FBI agent and assistant legal attaché at the US Embassy in Rome, who Steele had worked with in the FIFA case. Gator also headed up the FBI's Eurasian Organized Crime Unit, which specializes in investigating criminal groups from Georgia, Russia, and Ukraine. Gator was later identified as Steele's FBI handler in a July 16, 2018 congressional testimony before the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees by Lisa Page. On July 5, 2016, Gator travelled to London and met with Steele at the offices of Steele's firm, Orbis. At some point in early July, Steele passed his initial report to Nuland and the State Department. Newland later said these documents were passed on at some point to both the FBI and then Secretary of State John Kerry. Exactly what happened with the reports that Gator brought back from London and precisely who he gave them to within the FBI remains unknown, although some media reports have indicated they might have been sent to the FBI's New York field office. During the period following Steele's initial contact with the FBI, there appears to have been no further FBI interaction or contact with Steele. After nearly a month, it seems that Steele and Simpson decided to pursue a new channel into the FBI through then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr. Orr had known Steele since at least 2007, when they met during an official meeting while Steele was still employed by the British government as an MI6 agent. Steele had already been in contact with Bruce Orr via email in early 2016. Notably, most of these prior discussions appeared to discuss Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska and his ongoing efforts to obtain a US visa. Orr's wife Nellie also knew Simpson from years past and had begun working for Fusion as a Russian analyst in late 2015. Nellie Orr, who would remain with Fusion until September 2016, researched members of the Trump campaign and members of Trump's family for Simpson's company. On July 29th, Steele wrote to Orr saying that he would be in D.C. at short notice on business and asked to meet with both Orr and his wife. On July 30th, 2016, Bruce and Nellie Orr met Steele for breakfast at the Mayflower Hotel. Also present at the breakfast meeting was a fourth individual described by Orr as an associate of Mr. Steele's, another gentleman, younger fellow, I didn't catch his name. Of particular note, the FBI's counterintelligence investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, was formally opened the following day on July 31st, 2016, by FBI agent Peter Strzok. According to a transcript of Orr's testimony before Congress, Steele relayed information from his dossier at the meeting and claimed that a former head of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, had stated to someone that they had Donald Trump over a barrel. Steele also referenced Deripaska's business dealings with Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and foreign policy advisor Carter Page's meetings in Moscow. Lastly, Orr noted that Steele told him he had been in contact with the FBI but now had additional reports. Chris Steele had provided some reports to the FBI, I think too, but that Glenn Simpson had more, he said. Immediately following Orr's breakfast with Steele, Orr reached out to Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe and the two met in McCabe's office sometime between July 30th and the first days of August. Also present at this meeting was FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who had previously worked for Orr at the DOJ, where Bruce Orr was her direct supervisor for 5 to 6 years. Orr would later testify that during the July-August meeting, he told McCabe that his wife, Nellie, worked for Fusion, noting, "I wanted the FBI to be aware of any possible bias." FBI General Counsel James Baker, who reviewed a portion of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act FISA application on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, which relied in part on the information from Steele, told congressional investigators that he was never told of Orr's concerns regarding possible bias and conflicts of interest. On August 15, 2016, a week or two following Orr's meeting with McCabe, FBI agent Strzok would send the now infamous insurance policy text referencing McCabe to Lisa Page. "I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. On August 22nd, Orr had a meeting with Simpson. Orr would discuss that meeting during his testimony. "I don't know exactly what Chris Steele was thinking, of course, but I knew that Chris Steele was working for Glenn Simpson and that Glenn might have additional information that Chris either didn't have or was not authorized to present, give me, or whatever." It was at this meeting that Simpson first mentioned Sergey Millen and former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. During the same period, in late August 2016, Brennan began briefing members of the Gang of Eight through a series of meetings in August and September 2016. Notably, each Gang of 8 member was briefed separately, calling into question whether each of the members received the same information. Efforts by Democrats to block the release of transcripts from each meeting are ongoing. Notably, Comey did not notify Congress until early March 2017, and it's entirely possible he was unaware of Brennan's private briefings during the summer of 2016. During her testimony, FBI lawyer Lisa Page was questioned by Mark Meadows in relation to an August 25, 2016 text message that read, "What are you doing after the CH brief?" CH almost certainly referred to Crossfire Hurricane. Lisa Page was then asked about an event that took place on the same day as the CH brief, a briefing provided by Brennan to then Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid. "You give a brief on August the 25th. Director Brennan is giving a brief. It's not a Gang of 8 brief. It's a one-on-one, from what we can tell, a one-on-one briefing with Harry Reid at that point." According to Meadows, Brennan briefed Reid on the Steele dossier. "We have documents that would suggest that in that briefing the dossier was mentioned to Harry Reid, and then obviously we're going to have conversations. Does that surprise you that Director Brennan would be aware of the dossier?" Lisa Page appeared genuinely surprised that Brennan would have been aware of the dossier's existence at this early point, telling Meadows, "The FBI got this information from our source. If the CIA had another source of that information, I am neither aware of that nor did the CIA provide it to us if they did." She elaborated further as of August 2016. "I don't know who Christopher Steele is. I don't know that he's an FBI source. I don't know what he does. I have never heard of him in all of my life." This claim by Page seems incongruous when viewed against Orr's testimony that he met with Page and McCabe in the first days of August following his July 30th, 2016 breakfast with Steele. "My initial meeting was with Mr. McCabe and with Lisa Page. I was telling them about what I was hearing from Chris Steele." Meanwhile, Brennan's briefing prompted Reid to write not one but 2 letters to Comey. Both demanded that Comey commence an investigation with the details to be made public. Reid's first letter, which touched on Carter Page, was sent on August 27, 2016. Reid's second letter, far angrier and declaring Comey to be in possession of material information, was sent on October 30, 2016. There had been reports that Comey had been considering closing the FBI investigation into Trump, something that Brennan was strongly opposed to. Now with Reid's letter sent, that avenue was effectively closed. The termination of the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation would be all but impossible in the face of Reid's public demands. Perhaps it was in response to Reid's August 27th letter that the FBI suddenly reached out to Steele in September 2016, asking him for all the information in his possession. The team working on Crossfire Hurricane received documents and a briefing from Steele in mid-September, reportedly at a meeting in Rome, where Gator was also present. During Lisa Page's testimony, she appeared to corroborate this account, noting that the team received the reports that are known as the dossier from an FBI agent who was Christopher Steele's handler in August of 2016. She would later clarify the timing, noting, "We received the reporting from Steele in mid-September." A text sent to her by FBI agent Peter Strzok on October 12, 2016, may provide us with the actual date. "We got the reporting on September 19, looks like got it early August." Steele had produced 8 reports from June 20th, 2016 through the end of August 2016. There is also one undated report included in the dossier. No further reports were generated by Steele until September 14th, when he suddenly wrote 3 separate memos in one day. One of the memos referenced a Russian bank named Alpha Bank, misspelled as Alpha in his memo. As the dossier was making its way into the FBI, the agency began its preparations to obtain a FISA warrant on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, who was surveilled under Title I of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. According to Baker's testimony, it appears that the FBI began to set its sights on Carter Page in the summer of 2016. When asked how he had first gained knowledge of the FBI's intention to pursue a FISA on Carter Page, Baker testified that it came through his familiarity with the FBI's investigation. Mr. Baker, I learned of, so I was aware when the FBI first started to focus on Carter Page. I was aware of that because it was part of the broader investigation that we were conducting, so I was aware that we were investigating him, and then at some point in time, Mr. Meadows, but that was many years ago. That was in 2014, or are you talking about 2016? Mr. Baker, I'm talking about 2016 in the summer. Mr. Meadows, okay. Mr. Baker, yeah, and so I was aware of the investigation, and then at some point in time, as part of the regular briefings on the case, the briefers mentioned that they were going to pursue a FISA. It appears the FBI and possibly the CIA began to focus on Carter Page earlier than Baker was aware. Carter Page had been invited some months prior to a July 2016 symposium held at Cambridge regarding the upcoming election. The speaker list was notable. Madeleine Albright, former U.S. Secretary of State, Vin Weber, Republican Party strategist and former congressman, Peter Ammon, German ambassador to the UK, Sir Richard Dealer, former head of MI6, Bridget Kendall, BBC diplomatic correspondent and the next master of Peterhouse College, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, former Defence and Foreign Secretary. Carter Page attended the event just 4 days after his July 2016 Moscow trip, and it was here that he first encountered Stephen Halper during his London visit. Page's Moscow trip would later feature prominently in the Steele dossier. Halper, who had been outed as an FBI informant, stayed in contact with Carter Page for the next 14 months, severing ties exactly as the final FISA warrant on Page expired. Tricia Anderson, the Principal Deputy General Counsel for the FBI and head of the Bureau's National Security and Cyber Law Branch, approved the application for a warrant to spy on Carter Page before it went to FBI Director James Comey. According to Anderson, pre-approvals for the Carter Page FISA were provided by both McCabe and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates before the FISA application was ever presented to her for review. My boss and my boss's boss had already reviewed and approved this application, and in fact the Deputy Attorney General, who had the authority to sign the application to be the substantive approver on the FISA application itself, had approved the application, and that typically would not have been the case before I did that. This is what Anderson said. The unusual preliminary reviews and approvals from both McCabe and Yates appear to have had a substantial impact on the normal review process, leading other individuals like Anderson to believe that the Carter Page FISA warrant was more vetted than perhaps it really was. Anderson also testified that she had not read the Carter Page FISA prior to signing off on the application and passing it along to Comey for the final signature. According to FBI lawyer Sally Moyer, the underlying Woods file, which provides facts supporting the allegations made in a FISA application, was only read by the originating agent and the supervisory special agent in the field. Moyer also noted that the Woods file relating to the Page FISA had not been reviewed or audited by anyone. The Carter Page application was largely reliant on the Steele dossier, which was unverified at its time of submission to the FISA court and remains unverified to this day. Circular reporting provided by Steele himself was used as corroboration of the dossier. Additionally, Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, whose conversation with Australian diplomat Alexander Downer was used to open the FBI's July 31, 2016 counterintelligence investigation, is referenced in the FISA, yet there is no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. This is according to a House Intelligence Committee memo. Moyer testified that without the Steele dossier, the Carter Page FISA would have had a 50-50 chance of achieving the probable cause standard before the FISA court. Notably, the Steele dossier is generally considered to have been largely discredited. On September 19th, shortly after Steele completed his latest 3 memos, FBI General Counsel James Baker met with Perkins Coie partner Michael Sussman, the lawyer the DNC turned to on April 28, 2016, after discovering the alleged hack of their servers. Sussman, who sought out the meeting, presented Baker with documents that Baker described as a stack of material, I don't know, maybe a quarter-inch, half-inch thick or something like that, clipped together, and then I believe there was some type of electronic media as well, a disc or something. The information that Sussman gave to Baker was related to what Baker described as a surreptitious channel of communications between the Trump Organization and a Russian organization associated with the Russian government. Baker was describing alleged communications between Alpha Bank and a server in the Trump Tower. The allegations, which were investigated by the FBI and proven to be false, were widely covered in the media. According to Baker's testimony, there appears to have been at least 3 meetings with Sussman, the first in person and at least 2 subsequent meetings by phone. In either the second or third conversation, Baker came to understand the New York Times was also in possession of Sussman's information. As would become clear later, other members of the media also had this same information. As Baker was meeting with Sussman, Steele was back in Washington for a series of meetings that included his DOJ contact, Bruce Orr. On September 23, 2016, Orr again met with Steele for breakfast, telling lawmakers during testimony Steele was in Washington, D.C. again, and he reached out to me, and again we met for breakfast and he provided some additional information. Orr said this meeting concerned similar topics that were discussed at the July 30, 2016 meeting, but did not provide further details. Orr would also meet either on the same month or in early October with FBI agent Peter Strzok, FBI lawyer Lisa Page, and DOJ career officials from the Criminal Division Bruce Swartz, Zainab Ahmad, and Andrew Wiseman. Orr testified that he was unsure whether Wiseman was at this or a later meeting. Both Wiseman and Ahmad would later become part of the team assembled by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. At the same time that Bruce Orr met with Christopher Steele for breakfast on September 23, 2016, Yahoo News reporter Michael Isikoff published an article about Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page. The article, which was headlined U.S. Intel Officials Probe Ties Between Trump Advisor and Kremlin, was based on an interview with Steele. Isikoff's article would later be used by the FBI in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act FISA spy warrant application on Carter Page as corroborating information. Following the publication of the Isikoff article, the Hillary for America campaign released a same-day statement touting Isikoff's bombshell report with the full article attached. A second lengthy article was published on September 23 by Politico, Who is Carter Page? The Mystery of Trump's Man in Moscow, by Julia Ioffe. This article was particularly interesting as it appeared to highlight media efforts by Fusion GPS. As I started looking into Page, I began getting calls from 2 separate corporate investigators, digging into what they claim are all kinds of shady connections Page has to all kinds of shady Russians. One is working on behalf of various unnamed Democratic donors. The other won't say who turned him on to Page's scent. Both claimed to me that the FBI was investigating Page for allegedly meeting with Igor Senchin and Sergei Ivanov, who was until recently Putin's chief of staff, both of whom are on the sanctions list when Page was in Moscow in July for that speech. Ioffe noted that seemingly everyone I talked to also had talked to the Washington Post, and then there were these corporate investigators who drew a dark and complex web of Page's connections. Her article also mentioned rumors regarding Alpha Bank. It was probably during this same trip to Washington that Steele also met with Jonathan Weiner, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Law Enforcement and former Special Envoy for Libya, who Steele had known since at least 2010. Weiner had received a separate dossier very similar to Steele's from longtime Clinton confidant Sidney Blumenthal. This second dossier had been compiled by another longtime Clinton operative, former journalist Cody Shearer, and echoed claims made in the Steele dossier. Weiner gave Steele a copy of the second dossier. Steele then shared the second dossier with the FBI, who may have used it as a means to corroborate Steele's own dossier. Steele was also meeting with US media during his DC visit and doing so at Fusion's instruction. According to UK court documents, Steele testified that he briefed the New York Times, the Washington Post, Yahoo News, the New Yorker and CNN at the end of September 2016. Steele would engage in a second round of media contact in mid-October 2016, meeting again with the New York Times, Washington Post and Yahoo News. Steele testified that all these meetings were conducted verbally in person. Thank you for watching part 1 of Spygate. Part 2 will be released very soon. Please leave your comments below. What do you think about Spygate and all the players involved? I'd be very interested to hear them. From all of us here at Declassified, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.